Flight 625 approached St. Thomas in daytime VFR conditions. According to various company guidelines, with the latest winds reported at 120 degrees at 10 knots, the pilot should have selected a flaps 40 approach configuration. However, the captain stated that he knew that any southeast wind at St. Thomas would be gusty, which, per company procedure, allowed the use of flaps 30. He also stated that the aircraft at flaps 30 is more controllable, is easier to manage, and that you have a greater margin for what is ahead. According to the investigation, this configuration change increased the approach speed and added approximately 200 feet to the predicted landing distance. Investigators also noted that the lower drag at flaps 30 reduced the deceleration rate and made the aircraft more vulnerable to float caused by wind gusts. Over the threshold, the aircraft was at 80 feet, only slightly high, and at VREF plus 10 knots, both within acceptable limits. The first officer made the usual altitude callouts at 100, 50, 40, 30, 20, and 10 feet. At about 20 feet, at the start of the landing flare, an increasing headwind gust hit the aircraft, resulting in a slight bank. The captain corrected the bank angle, but with the increased airspeed, the airplane floated down the runway for about 6 seconds. At that point, the first officer pointed out to the captain that he was still high. This prompted the captain to force the aircraft onto the runway. The investigation concluded that if the captain had continued with a maximum performance full stop, he would have stopped on the runway, and certainly before reaching the end of the overrun. Also, with the engines having to accelerate from idle, there was no longer enough runway to accomplish a go-around. The captain advanced the throttles, and not sensing much of a response, he pushed them full forward while the first officer positioned the flaps to the flaps 25 go-around position. At this point, the captain decided that he was not getting the expected engine response and that the go-around would not be successful, so he initiated a full stop. Speed brakes were not deployed. In post-accident interviews, the captain stated that he thought the thrust reversers deployed. Tire marks indicating the initiation of heavy braking began 3,950 feet from the approach end of the runway. Approximately 200 feet beyond the end of the runway, an increasing roar was heard on the cockpit voice recorder. The investigation assumed that this was the noise associated with the thrust reversers reaching full power. Approximately 3 seconds and 1,000 feet beyond the end of the runway, the airplane came to a stop, having impacted a gas station and erupting into flames. This animation is a real-time playback of Flight 625's flight path during the accident sequence. Cockpit communications are shown in the inset box. The inclusion of these communications is intended to illustrate how rapidly events occurred during the landing. The investigation noted that even though the airplane floated well past the touchdown zone, a go-round was not initiated.